Markets sent into a bit of a tailspin on Monday. Things looking a little bit better today?
Yes, the Moscow trading has just begun there, and the stock market opened up about 2% in trading after yesterday's losses of almost 11% on the MySex index of shares. That's the opening price. You can see there it's up, in fact, slightly more since just a moment ago. It was up over 4%. We've seen gas companies, Rosneft and Gazprom, two of those companies saw the biggest falls on the MySex yesterday. Their shares back in positive territory. Rosneft up around 4%, Gazprom up about 3.8% yesterday. The ruble is also up against the dollar after hitting its record low level yesterday. Now, investors had fled Russian stocks over fears of a possible military intervention in Ukraine and the effect a conflict could have on the country's economy. We're expecting the European markets to open in positive territory. We'll bring you those figures, of course, later on when we get them. A significantly different picture on the Asian markets today, also from what we were talking about yesterday. The Hang Seng in Hong Kong opening up, trading up about 0.6%. As you can see, this is the Chinese legislative session set to begin tomorrow. Investors looking forward very keenly to that. And the Nikkei in Japan also in positive territory, just the Shanghai Composite and the Kospi in Seoul dragging slightly behind there.
Not just the stock markets being affected by this crisis in Ukraine, though.
No, as always, the markets don't like uncertainty, and people in times of uncertainty like this tend to flee to those traditional safe havens, gold being chief among them. This is what happened to the COMEX gold price index yesterday. You can see the opening price there spiked on Monday. It went to the highest level since September, closing at about just over $1,350, up about $2. That, of course, the usual sort of thing that we expect to see when we have this sort of uncertainty.
Now let's look ahead a little bit to later today. A delegation from the International Monetary Fund is expected in Kiev, isn't it?
Yeah, they're laying the groundwork for what's expected to be a $2 billion emergency loan to Kiev to keep the country's economy afloat. It'll be a special rapid financing deal. Ukraine has officially asked for $15 billion, but this deal will come through before those elections planned for May. The IMF will, though, demand strict reforms of the country's economy in exchange for their loans, including a possible privatisation of part of the country's oil and gas industries. Kate Moody has more.
The clock ticks down as Kiev waits for a financial lifeline. Ukraine's new prime minister has asked for at least $15 billion in loans and told a gathering of European business leaders he's ready to do whatever it takes.
An economy which lives on loans and does not create income will be catastrophic. That's why we will have to carry out the harshest reforms.
Those measures could include privatizing parts of the country's crucial oil and gas sector, as well as allowing the currency to float more freely, cutting state subsidies on household utilities, and reducing overall government spending by about 15%. Ukraine's debt stands around 45% of GDP. It owes a total $13 billion in state debt payments this year and is paying up to 34% to borrow cash in the short term. It also owes the IMF $4.5 billion from a past aid program that was halted as promised reforms stalled. The IMF has already said it's ready to respond to Kiev's new requests for assistance, with the US and EU also set to contribute. While the international community may be prepared to act more quickly than usual, experts say it's not of the utmost urgency. The country still has some $15 billion in reserve, enough to cover its next big debt obligation, a $1 billion bond payment due in June.
Let's take a quick look now at some of the day's other business stories. And the Australian government says it wants to change the rules that limit foreign ownership of the national airline Qantas. The law currently limits foreign investors to holding up to 49% of the carrier's capital. The move is opposed by opposition parties in Australia and isn't likely to pass a Senate vote. Qantas is already cutting 5,000 jobs after announcing losses of $210 million in the second half of 2013. The crowdfunding website Kickstarter says it's raised more than $1 billion for creative projects to date. The company announced the milestone had been passed late on Monday. High-profile projects funded through the site include a Veronica Mars movie and plans to bring the novel American Psycho to the London stage. A Microsoft founder, Bill Gates, is back on top of the Forbes Billionaires list. His $76 billion fortune won him back the top spot from Mexican telecoms entrepreneur Carlos Slim. Forbes magazine says a record 1,645 billionaires made the list this year, 200 more than 2013.
And finally, shock here at France 24. Basically, this is because a new survey shows the most expensive city to live in, and it is not Paris, is it?
Oh, Singapore. All the billionaires be going there. Singapore topped the list, which is the worldwide cost of living survey by the Economist's Intelligence Unit. This is because of its strong currency, its reliance on imports, and high transport costs that push it into the top spot. It's also the most expensive place in the world to buy clothes. So if you're visiting, perhaps buy them before you go.
Yeah.
The study examines 400 different prices in 131 cities, things like food, drink, rent, that sort of idea. So Singapore took the top spot. Let's have a look at how the rest of the top 5 shake down. Paris did come in at number 2, followed by Oslo, Zurich and Sydney, Australia. Largely, there's a lot of Asian and Australian cities moving up those rankings actually because of their stronger currency, which is making them comparatively more expensive. Paris, I can tell you, of the top 10, has the highest price for a litre of petrol, but the lowest for a bottle of wine.
I'm quite surprised at those figures because coming from or spending some of my life in London, I would have thought London was more expensive than Paris, but it's not even in the list.
Not in the top 5. Not in the top 10, in fact.
Really?
Yeah.
Fake surveys. Thank you very much, Stephen. Stephen Carroll with Business here on France 24, bringing us fake surveys. I'm sure it's right. Anyway, we're going to go over there, talk to Flo now. Have a look at what's grabbing the headlines here in France. The big topic in the press today, tensions between Russia and the West, of course,